Once upon a time there was a king who loved hunting. He had vast forests teeming with all kinds of game. However, at the farthest edges of his kingdom lay a strip of land surrounded by steep hills. The locals believed this area was enchanted because no one who went hunting there ever returned. One day, the king announced to his nobles, "Let's go and see what's out there." His men tried to dissuade him, saying, "Your Majesty, please reconsider. It's too dangerous." But the king insisted, and they set out on the ill-fated journey never to return. The king had 2 sons. The eldest succeeded him as the new king. One day, the younger prince said to his brother, "I'm going to avenge our father's death." The new king attempted to talk him out of it, but to no avail. The young prince was determined. He had some loyal servants who volunteered to accompany him, and together they embarked on the perilous journey. As soon as they entered the enchanted land, they spotted a beautiful antelope running ahead of them. They began to chase it, but the creature seemed to mock them with its graceful leaps over bushes and rocks. The hunters chased the antelope until late in the day, when they came upon a dense forest surrounded by steep rocks. The antelope leapt over the rocks and vanished into the forest. The hunters' horses couldn't go any further, so they dismounted. To their surprise, they found an elegant tent pitched among the trees next to a crystal-clear spring. Inside the tent was a table laden with all kinds of delicious food. Famished, the men began to devour the food ravenously and quench their thirst with water from the spring. However, the young prince didn't touch the food or water. He suspected some trickery behind this unexpected feast. While his men indulged, the prince explored the surroundings. To his horror, he discovered a pile of human skeletons, not far from the tent, their bleached bones grinning eerily. Could these be the remains of those who came hunting in this enchanted land and never returned? He wondered. Are my father's bones among them? How did they die? With these grim thoughts, he returned to the tent. To his shock and grief, he found some of his men already dead and others taking their last breaths. He tried to help them, but it was futile. Soon they were all as lifeless as stones. The prince realized the terrible truth. Both the food and water were poisoned. This was how all who ventured into this region met their end, their bones piled up as grisly trophies. The prince's blood boiled with anger. He vowed to confront the perpetrator of this diabolical scheme, be it human, fairy, or demon, and avenge the victims. As he was deep in thought, he heard the sound of approaching horses. Quickly, he retreated into the depths of the forest, tied his horse to a sycamore tree, and hid behind some bushes. From there, he could observe the tent and its surroundings without being seen. Soon, a group of riders arrived. They seemed pleased to see the dead men and began stripping them of their clothes and belongings. They loaded each man's possessions onto his own horse, preparing to lead them away. The prince noticed their leader, who stood out from the rest. This person wore a complete suit of white armor, had long flowing hair, and a face of such grace and beauty that it seemed almost feminine. The prince, watching closely, took aim with his bow and arrow. He was about to shoot the leader in the forehead when he suddenly stopped himself. "That's a woman," he realized. "I won't shoot a woman." Instead, he leapt out from his hiding place and confronted the leader, exclaiming, "Are you human fairy or demon? Reveal yourself. Luring people to their deaths with poison isn't the act of a true hero. Come, let's settle this with swords." The leader's face initially flashed with rage at the prince's words, but within seconds, a natural feminine grace returned to her features. She replied in a voice so sweet and musical that it was unlike any the prince had ever heard. "Young man, I'll spare your life if your heart is as brave as your words. My name is Zoolvisia. If you want to prove your courage to me, you must come to where I live." With that, she spurred her horse and galloped away, disappearing behind the trees and rocks. The prince stood frozen, as if struck by lightning. Zoolvisia's beauty had captivated him. Her face was radiant, her hair golden, and her horse as swift as lightning. He wondered if she was truly just a maiden. "Zoolvisia! Zoolvisia!" the prince suddenly exclaimed. "I will find you." Without hesitation, he mounted his horse and rode off in the direction Zoolvisia and her followers had taken. It was late evening, the sun having long since set. After fumbling his way through the darkness for a while, he spotted a distant light and steered his horse towards it. As he approached, he saw a cave where a fairy woman was kneading dough. "Good evening, mother," said the prince politely. "Heaven bless you, son," replied the old fairy. "Neither snake on its belly nor bird with its wing could reach here. How did you manage to come?" "Your love brought me here, mother," the prince answered cleverly. The fairy woman took a liking to the prince and said, "My 7 fairy sons have just gone out hunting. They hunt all night and return in the morning. If they find you here, they'll devour you. Let me hide you." She concealed the prince in a hole near the cave. At daybreak the 7 fairies returned. They sniffed the air and exclaimed, "Mother, you ate a human last night. Didn't you save at least some bones for us to chew on?" "I didn't eat any human," their mother replied. "But my nephew, the son of my human sister, has come to visit us." "Where is he, mother? We want to meet our human cousin," the fairies said eagerly. The old woman brought the prince out from his hiding place and introduced him to the fairies. They were delighted to meet him and asked why he was on this journey. The prince explained that he was pursuing Zoolvisia. "Zoolvisia!" the 7 brothers exclaimed. "Cousin, please reconsider. This is an extremely dangerous quest. Zoolvisia is a cruel tyrant. No human who has ever undertaken this journey has returned. Stay with us instead. Be our elder brother, and we'll be your loyal subjects. We can live happily together." "No," the prince insisted. "Come what may, I must go." The prince then gave the 7 fairy brothers a pair of scissors, saying, "If you see blood dripping from these scissors, know that I'm in danger. Come to my rescue then." He bid farewell to his new fairy cousins and continued on his journey. On his way, he came across another cave where 7 more fairies lived with their mother, who was the sister of the first fairy woman. They also accepted him as their cousin and tried to dissuade him from his quest. The prince gave them a looking glass, saying, "If you see this mirror covered in sweat, know that I'm in trouble. Hurry to my aid." He then arrived at a third dwelling, where 7 more fairies lived with their mother, sister to the previous 2. They too accepted him as a cousin and attempted to convince him not to go. The prince gave them a razor, saying, "If you see drops of blood falling from the edge of this razor, know that my life is in peril. Rush to my rescue." Continuing on his way, the prince met an old monk in a cottage. The monk also tried to discourage him, but seeing the prince's determination, he offered some advice. "Listen carefully. Zoolvisia is the most beautiful maiden in the world, a princess with a powerful talisman. She commands 40 maidens who act as her Amazon warriors. Every morning at dawn, she climbs to the top of her castle tower, dressed in a robe of pearls. From there, she surveys her realm to spot any intruders, human or magical." The monk continued his advice. "Zoolvisia calls out 3 times with a loud voice. Anyone on her land who hears her voice immediately drops dead, as if struck by lightning. It's she who takes the form of an antelope, luring hunters astray and killing them with poisoned food and water. Now, here's what you must do. When you reach the vicinity of her castle, set up a stick and put your cloak and cap on it. Dig a trench nearby and hide in it. Seal both your ears with beeswax so you can't hear a sound. At dawn, watch her on the tower. Don't move at her first or second call, but as soon as her third call ends, jump up from your hiding place and stand before her. This will break her talisman and subdue her." The prince thanked the old monk and continued his journey. Soon, he saw Zoolvisia's magnificent castle in the distance, adorned with gold and jewels. He followed the monk's instructions precisely. At Zoolvisia's third call, he leapt up and stood before her, gazing at her. Zoolvisia recognized him and said, "You've overcome me. You're brave and a true hero worthy of me. No one except you has ever heard my voice and lived. Now, my talisman is broken and I'm just a woman. Come in, hero. My 40 maidens and I will serve you." The prince's heart swelled with emotion. All the hatred he had harbored toward the perpetrator of such terrible crimes vanished. He had fallen in love with Zoolvisia, and she with him. Zoolvisia let her rich golden hair cascade down from the window. The prince approached, took hold of her locks and kissed them, Miraculously, he was drawn up to the castle by her hair. They accepted each other as husband and wife and celebrated their wedding for 40 days and nights, served by the 40 maidens. After the festivities, Zoolvisia presented the prince with her lightning-fast horse. The animal seemed pleased with its new master. As the prince prepared to go hunting, Zoolvisia gave him a lock of her hair in a pearl box as a keepsake. The prince hunted daily. One day, while chasing a deer along the steep river banks, the pearl box fell into the water and disappeared. Though saddened, he returned home without it. The box was carried downstream to the kingdom of the king of the East. The king's fishermen found it and brought it to their master. Opening the box, the king was amazed to see the lock of golden hair. He summoned his noblemen and advisers, placing the box before them. "You must tell me whose hair this is," he demanded. "If you don't give me an answer in 3 days, I'll have your heads." "Long live the king," the men replied nervously. "We'll bring you an answer in 3 days." The nobleman frantically consulted all the learned men and magicians in the country, but to no avail. On the 3rd day, a witch heard of their predicament and approached them. "I can tell you what it is, but what will you give me?" she asked. "If you save our heads," they promised, "each of us will give you a handful of gold coins." The witch agreed, took the gold, and told them about Zoolvisia and her golden hair. The noblemen relayed this information to the king, claiming they had solved the riddle themselves. "Very well," said the king. "Now I want you to bring me Zoolvisia. I wish to marry her. You have 40 days. If you fail, I'll have your heads." Desperate, the men returned to the witch, pleading, "Only you can accomplish this and save our lives. We'll give you whatever you want if you bring Zoolvisia to us." The witch agreed. She caught 20 snakes, put them in a large pitcher and corked it. She made a whip from a big black snake, mounted the pitcher, and struck it 3 times. The pitcher began to fly through the sky like a winged creature, with the witch riding it. Soon she arrived at Zoolvisia's garden. Hiding the pitcher in the weeds, she sat by the roadside where the prince would pass on his way back from hunting. She deliberately wore tattered clothes and dusty shoes. When the prince returned from hunting that evening, he saw the witch and asked, "Who are you, and how did you get here?" The witch replied in a pitiful voice, "Oh, my son, may heaven bless you. I'm a pilgrim on my way to Jerusalem. I lost my caravan and got lost. Seeing your house in the distance, I came here to rest. For heaven's sake, give me some bread and water, and let me sleep by your gate with your dog." The prince, feeling compassionate, offered to take her on his horse. However, his wise steed, sensing the witch's evil nature, reared up and threw her off. "Don't worry, son," said the witch. "I'll follow slowly. You go ahead with your horse." When Zoolvisia heard that the prince had brought an old woman, she warned him, "Don't let her enter our house. She might be a witch and bring misfortune upon us." The prince instructed the maidens to keep the old woman separate and not allow her near Zoolvisia. But the cunning witch soon won over the maidens, who praised her to their mistress and asked if she could meet Zoolvisia, just for fun. Zoolvisia reluctantly agreed. The witch, with her 1,001 ways of charming young women, quickly became Zoolvisia's favorite companion. One day she said to Zoolvisia, "How blessed you are to have such a heroic husband who overcomes all challenges and is never defeated. He discovered your secret, broke your talisman, and won your love. Surely you must know the secret of his bravery." "No," Zoolvisia admitted, "I don't know his secret." The witch scoffed. "What kind of husband and wife are you? He knows your secret, but you don't know his, and he claims to love you. How strange." These words piqued Zoolvisia's curiosity. That evening she pestered the prince repeatedly until he finally revealed his secret. "The source of my bravery is my magic dagger. I carry it in my belt during the day and put it under my pillow at night. If it were taken away, I'd lose all my power." They swore to keep this secret between them and exchanged rings as a symbol of their loyalty unto death. However, the next day, Zoolvisia, despite her vow, told the witch the secret, adding, I'm telling you this to show how much my husband truly loves me." That night, the witch used her dark magic to cast a deep sleep over everyone in the castle. At midnight, she crept into the prince's room, took the magic dagger from under his pillow and threw it out the window into a nearby pond. Then she returned to bed, pretending to sleep. The next morning, Zoolvisia and the maidens were alarmed when the prince didn't rise. They entered his room to find him lying on the floor, unconscious and foaming at the mouth. They called to him, but there was no response. "Check under his pillow for the magic dagger," Zoolvisia cried, but the dagger was gone, and they all began to wail in despair. The witch, feigning concern, came to see if the prince was truly dead. She put on a show of grief, beating her chest and pulling her hair. Then she left, only to return with her pitcher full of hissing snakes. Everyone was terrified and began screaming. The witch commanded the snakes to bite the maidens, who all fell unconscious. Then she turned to Zoolvisia and said, "Now you must obey me and come with me. If you refuse, I'll set these snakes on you, and they'll tear you to pieces." Zoolvisia, paralyzed with fear, couldn't speak. The witch pushed her down the stairs and shoved her into the pitcher, sealing it shut. She then mounted the pitcher, struck it 3 times with her snake whip, and flew away. They landed in the country of the king of the east. The witch handed Zoolvisia over to the king's ministers, who paid her with a horse-load of gold. Zoolvisia was then taken to the king's palace. Meanwhile, the 21 fairy cousins of the prince saw blood dripping from the scissors and razor and sweat covering the looking-glass. Realizing their human kinsman was in danger, they rushed to his rescue. At the castle, they found the prince still unconscious and the maidens covered in snakes. After killing the snakes, the maidens revived and told the fairies what had happened. They searched everywhere for the dagger, but couldn't find it. As evening fell, everyone was hungry, but there was no food in the castle. The fairies noticed large fish swimming in the pond and dove in to catch them. As they threw a particularly large fish ashore, it split in 2, and to their amazement, the magic dagger fell out. The fish had swallowed it. The moment they placed the dagger under the prince's pillow, he sprang to life. After washing up, he was surprised to see his fairy cousins. They quickly explained everything that had happened. The prince immediately ran to the stable. His horse was there, but in a pitiful state. It hadn't eaten or drunk anything and was covered in dust. As soon as the animal saw and smelled its master, it jumped up, neighing happily. The prince fed and watered it, groomed it thoroughly, and then said, kissing its forehead, "Oh, my wise horse, you foresaw this calamity with your unerring instinct when you threw that old witch off your back. Look at what she's done to us. Now let's go after Zoolvisia." The horse neighed and stomped its hooves as if to say, "Yes, let's go. I'm ready." The prince returned to the castle, gave the maidens generous gifts, and sent them away as free women. He left the castle and its treasures to the fairies, taking only his saddlebags full of gold coins. Mounting his horse, he rode downstream until he reached the city of the King of the East. The prince stopped at an old woman's cottage on the outskirts of the city and knocked on the door. "Do you have a place for me to stay tonight, mother?" he asked. "No, sir, I have no room for you," the old woman replied. "You'd better look elsewhere." The prince handed her a fistful of gold coins. "Here's something for your trouble." "Oh, bless you, son," the old woman exclaimed. "I suddenly remembered I have space for both you and your horse." After settling in and having a meal, the prince asked about the news in the city. The old woman told him that Zoolvisia was in the king's palace. For 35 days there had been a grand wedding festival, and in 5 days she was to marry the king. However, Zoolvisia had declared that she was already married and would rather die by drinking poison than be forced to wed the king. She refused to see anyone. "That's enough, mother," the prince said. "Can you keep a secret?" "Better than you'd wish," the old woman assured him. "Here's another handful of gold," said the prince. "Go to the market and buy the most expensive outfit you can find. Put it on and go see Zoolvisia. Wear this ring on your finger and show it to her. Then come back and tell me what she says." The old woman did exactly as the prince instructed. The palace servants, mistaking her for a noblewoman, informed Zoolvisia that an important lady had come to visit. "I don't want to see anyone," Zoolvisia cried out. But the old woman pushed past the servants and entered Zoolvisia's room, holding up the ring. Upon seeing it, Zoolvisia's demeanour changed completely. "Welcome, kind lady," she exclaimed sweetly. "Please sit down." She then closed the door and asked, "Where is the owner of this ring?" "He's a guest in my house," the old woman replied, "waiting to know your wishes." Zoolvisia said, "Tell him to wait for 3 days. Go to the king and say you've persuaded me to marry him. On the 3rd day, I'll go to the public garden for recreation. It's up to my beloved to do the rest. Farewell." The old woman relayed this message to the king, who was overjoyed and rewarded her generously. She then returned and told the prince everything. On the 3rd day, as Zoolvisia was in the public garden with great pomp, the prince arrived on his lightning-fast horse. In the blink of an eye, he swept Zoolvisia onto his horse and disappeared. The crowd thought it was a whirlwind and panicked. When the king and his men realized what had happened, they gave chase. The prince, having hidden Zoolvisia safely, returned and, using his magic dagger, defeated the king and his favorites. He then revealed his identity to the people, who were tired of their tyrannical king. The crowd begged the prince and Zoolvisia to become their new rulers. The prince fetched Zoolvisia, and amid great celebration, they were escorted to the palace. There, they were crowned as the new king and queen, ruling justly and beloved by their people for many years to come.